This is TWiT.
And now let's move to Marco. Overcast, which is Marco Arment. Marco Arment doesn't need the money. He was, I'm presuming.
I don't know about that.
I shouldn't say that.
He's very young.
He's got children.
Yeah.
But he was one of the original Tumblr folks, and I'm sure made a little money there. He also created Instapaper, which was a great success. He's since sold it. I get the feeling that Overcast, which is his podcast app, was a labor of love more than. But I don't know. You know him. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think he got some money obviously from the Tumblr sale, but he's a developer and he wants to. I think it gave him the freedom to explore what he wanted to do and work on an app that the audio engine took him probably a year to build, and he had the freedom to do that. But still, he wants to create. He wants to work on something sustainable, something that brings in enough money that he can support his family ideally on that. And what's interesting here is that this is a niche, right? Just podcasting apps alone, it's a niche.
Well,
Apple makes one for free,
right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is he did a free app with a single in-app purchase to unlock all of the kind of premium features. So it is a free-to-play kind of approach with the unlock. That's a shareware kind of thing. I think that's really cool. What's interesting about the numbers is we all knew there would be a big bump when it was first launched, but it looks like it settled down to a reasonable amount of new purchases every week, and that's kind of encouraging as a renewable resource for
He's
app
currently
development.
at $20,000 a month, which is a good profit. He says that's before taxes and costs, but he does call it profit.
And don't forget Apple's 30%, which I am amused by. That you hear about Apple's 30%, but then when you see like the specific number that Overcast made Apple $70,000 last year,
right?
It's like, wow, 30%. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah. He says total revenue was $164,000 for 2014, $164,000 after Apple, but before taxes and expenses. The only reason I mentioned he doesn't need the money is maybe it makes sense that it's a free app with a single in-app purchase of $5 to unlock everything. Probably, I would guess. Let's see.
He explored a lot of different models. He was initially thinking of doing some very different things with it, and decided that you had to be free in the App Store to be tried.
I think so. And I think this is the ethical way to do it. It's not expensive. It's free to try. The paid tier is not necessary. In fact, it looks like only 14.7% of his downloads paid, which might be a little disheartening. He says 200,000 people launched the app and created an account out of 318,000 downloads. So you could see you get a lot of downloads. You get fewer people, like considerably fewer, actually setting it up, and then far fewer actually buying it. Only 46,000, people bought it. Although not bad revenue, right? He only pays, this is interesting, $750 a month for his server.
Servers are so cheap, it's crazy.
That's really important if you want to be an indie app developer. Well, what are my ongoing costs? He says it's half my family's health insurance.
If you listen to his show, he talks about how he's learning Go now to try and optimize it further. So he can get
and Go is specifically a multi-threaded language from Google that it really is about server side, right? Yeah. He wouldn't write the app in Go, but he would write the server-side stuff in Go. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons his revenue is going okay now is because you can start as a free user and use it for a while, and then say, oh, now I do want to add those features and convert.
From talking to Phil Lieben over at Evernote, that seems to be what Evernote's strategy is. They always have given away Evernote, and they have a premium yearly subscription, which is a little different than pay once thing, but still similar enough. And I think the conversion rate is similar, and he's very happy. Go ahead.
The amazing thing about Overcast is I was just looking. He gives you some of the stats inside the preferences screen, and I only listen to I work at home, so I don't have time to listen to a lot of podcasts. When I used to listen to them all the time when I commute, but even on my schedule, it saved me 7 hours in the last 2 months. Not by artificially accelerating what people say, but giving you a perfectly listenable podcast and just trimming down the excess amounts of blank area.
Right.
And that to me is incredibly valuable. That's 7 more shows that I managed to fit in that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Oh.
It's also a feature that you don't see on the other podcast apps.
Right.
Which sets it apart. What I loved about the graphs that he was showing was that it's not one of these apps that it made a lot of money off of its initial publicity, and then it started tailing off, and now it's just sort of at some sort of a nominal event. It seems to have really become part of the vocabulary of the App Store right now. It's a really good choice of an app too, because people get tired of a game, but once you get like a sort of a pantry staple app, like a podcast app, where this is something that almost everybody is going to want to try and almost everybody is going to see the advantages of, that's the sort of thing where it can continue to sell at a good sustainable rate month after month after month.
I think a nice, $10,000 a month average income. I think for a lot of developers, they'd be very happy with that.
And keep in mind, Marco is the only one who works on this. He doesn't have people doing his support for him. He doesn't have other programmers working for him. So really the premise here is, can one person build an app and have that income be enough that that's their salary?
Yeah.
And now Marco also has a podcast, so he's got two salaries. So he's half podcaster, half developer. But these numbers seem like they would support a single developer pretty well.
And I like that.
But the big thing is that I wouldn't jump on the Marco doesn't need the money, but it really does point to this and with Monument Valley. This really isn't a quit your job and start developing apps sort of job. This is have a steady source of income that you can live on while you're developing this app in whatever time you have and whatever attention you can pay to it. Because this wasn't something he just batted out in a few weeks. This was something he'd been thinking about for a long time and then developing for a year and a half. And if he was, and in that time, that app is not generating any revenue. So
exactly,
it's helpful that he had everyone I know who's a successful app developer was able to do that essentially by giving up all of their free time for a good solid year to get that first app out the door. There's no gold rush. It really is about working hard, being very, very meticulous, having a game plan, and having really not just having a creative game plan, but having a business plan for how am I going to get this developed and how much time can I afford to put into this before I release it.